Rainier, good to see you in Beijing.
It's a pleasure to be with you and to be here.
We understand that WFP is one of the significant recipients of contributions made by China toward peace and stability around the world. Tell us more about what is the efficiency of using the donations coming from China and what have been the results so far?
So China has a special relationship with us. It's been about 45 years of a partnership. And because China is one of the few countries that's been both a recipient in the not too distant past of our assistance and transitioning to become a donor to WFP, I think there is an understanding of what hunger means, of what malnutrition means, of the importance of building community resilience and development. And through China's contributions to WFP, we've been able to support 35 countries. They've contributed to emergency assistance in about 35 countries. Some of the most dangerous: Afghanistan, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and it's been extremely helpful. We also leverage China's experience in agricultural development, in innovation, and through our office here, which really focuses on South-South and triangular cooperation, we take and transmit China's experience to countries of the South. So overall, it's a much valued partnership, and we see a growing role.
Fascinating, because I really want to ask you about how would you compare this, bilateral cooperation between China and other so-called South countries, and also South-South cooperation with the bridge like international organizations, WFP. How would you compare the two practices?
I think they reinforce each other is maybe the best way I can frame it, because in a lot of the countries that are evolving and addressing extreme food insecurity, poverty alleviation, and are looking for good practices to do so, what I think China does in the bilateral is direct cooperation, support, and advice. But what our South-South cooperation does is it manages to bring a more consistent way of exchanging on experiences, on leveraging technologies, on what has succeeded and what has failed. And so it creates a platform that across it many learn, and not a single country learns, but multiple countries are able to learn and exchange. And I think that also adds value. So they really, I would argue, reinforce each other.
How do you see are some of the most valuable best practices coming from China that you think is extremely important these days, as you earlier illustrated?
I think in the area of agricultural development, there is significant experience in China in post-harvest losses that China is able to transmit to other countries. That's quite critical. You also support a school feeding program that covers millions and hundreds of millions. And that is incredible for other countries. You are part of what we call the School Meals Coalition, and we are trying to increase the number of countries that sign up to that, which is a commitment by governments to support meals for children and the future generations' learning capacities. I would argue that it's also been on agricultural innovation. We've been managing to transmit and share experiences from China. Fundamentally, poverty alleviation is maybe the biggest success story in China, that hundreds of millions over the last decades have been lifted out of poverty, and there is significant learning for the global South in that.
Earlier, we have been devoting a lot of attention to food safety. Of course, it is still such an important task, but food security these days has become such a rising challenge, especially with the increasing numbers of conflicts and even wars. So you are always, WFP, at the front line of crisis. how would you articulate the different layers of challenges today as a result of a more fragmented world compared to, let's say, 8 or 10 years ago?
Indeed. You know, I often think, and I'm colored by my own experiences, and I come from East Africa. I think
and it's such a blessing, by the way.
It is
so you
in many
understand
ways. It is, absolutely.
how the world actually is.
It is, and I must say, I view food security as global security. You cannot differentiate the two. In many ways, revolutions that I have seen and witnessed growing up started because of a hike in bread prices, a hike and change in food prices. So food security is a critical precursor to political instability, to civil unrest. It actually is the first sign often of when revolutions start that can lead to a lot of instability and unrest. Now, we are challenged today because of an overlay of different elements. I have seen and witnessed climate change hit at a pace that is so frequent. When I was growing up, you would hear of a drought once every 20 years, and then it became once every 10 years. More recently, it's every 2-3 years. And a drought or any climatic shock doesn't need to be a crisis, but it becomes a crisis because it's so frequent that people don't have the ability to recover. So you have an increasing number of climatic shocks. You then have an increasing number of conflicts in the world. And then you lay on that the rising food price crisis. And it creates one of the worst food crises in modern history. To me, that's unacceptable. To you, that should be unacceptable. And so it is a global problem. And I think for most countries, it is the top agenda. Now, can we solve hunger and malnutrition? Absolutely. We can solve it if there is political will, we can solve it if there are resources, and we can solve it if we exchange on how it is we can overcome. Certainly the World Food Programme is well positioned in that way. Last year we fed and accessed 150 million people. And that's not a small thing, and we hope to access a similar number of people this year.
Some of the preconditions actually already exist. For example, there are abundant resources if we share it in the right way, if we work with the nature in the right way. On the other hand, there are also conditions that seem to be like luxury. For example, if there were more geopolitical peace and cooperation rather than conflicts. So from your side, how do you rally the morale of the team?
You know, I think almost everyone that works in this line of business that we do, and certainly in the World Food Programme, is there for the mission. You know, I cannot imagine why a young woman would be serving in Iraq today with WFP, or in Afghanistan or in Somalia in real hardships, putting her life at risk if it's not because she really wants to serve and to save lives. And I really salute everyone in our team, because it's a level of commitment that is really difficult to parallel. And I would say across the humanitarian spectrum this is the case, not just in WFP. And we do make a difference in people's lives. I think that's what keeps us at a personal level continuing to push. Where I will differ from you slightly is, I don't think the resources are coming to support saving lives as much as they were. In dollar terms, the amount of money that's coming into the humanitarian pot is actually increasing. In proportion terms, it is consistently decreasing simply because the number of crises in the world has increased. So WFP last year faced, for the first time ever, 64% of our needs were unfunded, of the needs of the communities we serve.
That's the highest in record?
That was the highest in our record. So we're used to being able to receive 60 to 70% of what we say is the need in the world, and we respond to that. But last year, it was the lowest ever, and we are not sure what the rest of the years and the forecast moving forward is going to take us. But the trend is a downward decline in proportion size. So we are worried. We are worried for the children we serve, for the women we serve, for the communities we serve, where our teams are risking their lives to be present, but don't have the resources to serve. I was in Syria about 2 months ago, and there we had to drop the food ration from 6 million people who used to receive assistance to 1 million. In Afghanistan, we dropped from 10 million were cut out from receiving assistance. In Somalia, 10 million to 3 million. So the resources are simply not shoring up. And really through this, I call on the whole world to continue supporting us so we can continue to save lives.
These days, you see economies are struggling. First, of course, out of the aftermath of the pandemic. And also, you also see the trends. Apparently, countries are looking more inward than outward. You also hear people talk about this is a very different stage of globalization compared to the earlier times. So how do you see the possibility that priorities are shifting for individual governments, economies, and decision-making processes? And how are you dealing with that reality?
I think that's a hard question. But if I go to the essence of it, I think we all have a responsibility at individual level, at a collective level, at organization level, at community level, at government level, at private sector level. And I think we have a responsibility to come together and respond to the needs of the world. I really do think that if we are able to collaborate between governments and private sector and communities and the United Nations and the NGOs, the whole system, we are able to end hunger, to end malnutrition, and many other sectors actually, even beyond food security, to address the water shortages, to address the health shortages in primary health care, which you have a story like no other in China also. And I really think that it is doable. I think that's why we still wake up and go to work, because we think we can do it. Despite the challenges and despite the divides in the world, we are hopeful that the common denominator is the people, and that we will come around that.
It's such a pleasure, Rania, talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing both your insights and your stories. Appreciate it.
And I am grateful to you for the time that you gave us today. Thank you for listening.